At the exact moment the family raised their glasses at a lavish celebration, a voice cut through the laughter. "She's going bankrupt and hiding it from all of you." Everyone turned. Samantha stood still. No denial, no rage, just a smile. One that unsettled the entire room. But no one knew just 3 weeks later she'd flipped the game, standing in the very riverfront estate her betrayer once dreamed of owning, delivering a line that would silence the entire family. It wasn't revenge. It was a masterclass in dignity and freedom. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gripping, emotional, and unforgettable storytelling episodes like this one. My name is Samantha Drew. I'm 34, live in Charleston, and run a company that sells ethically sourced organic pantry staples. Think quinoa, olive oil, and the kind of granola that makes you feel like your soul's been dry cleaned after eating it. Most people wouldn't know my name. That's intentional. I keep a low profile, avoid social media, and choose silence over spectacle. It's how I've always survived this family. I was born to a middle-income couple with quiet discipline and polite dreams. Dad was a biology teacher. Mom ran a local garden shop. We weren't poor. We just weren't the kind of people who wore monograms or bought wine in crates. But we had dinner together every night. That counted for something. What set me apart wasn't money, it was motion. I learned early to move strategically, silently, but always forward. Every promotion, every pivot, every clean financial line in my books was the result of waking up before the rest of the world. That's how I got here. And that's exactly what they hated. Charleston's summer heat doesn't just touch skin, it seeps into bone. That evening, the sky was the color of overripe peaches and the air stuck to the skin like judgment. I pulled into the circular driveway of the Watterson estate, an oversized display of Southern gentility and overcompensation owned by my mother's eldest brother, Uncle Byron. This wasn't just another family party. It was a spectacle, Uncle Byron's 70th birthday bash. Invitations had been printed, not emailed. A catering staff in black and white flitted through the courtyard like butlers from a period drama. A quartet played near the fountain. Someone had even rented doves, real ones. I parked my car discreetly behind a row of high-end European imports and stepped out wearing a sleek navy sheath dress, simple, tasteful, and entirely unbranded. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here out of respect. Sam, my cousin Rachel, squealed, her southern accent frosted with too many mimosas and too little sincerity. "We thought you might not come." "I wouldn't miss Uncle Byron's big day," I said with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Inside the ballroom was transformed into something between a royal wedding and a real estate convention. White roses spilled from crystal vases and chandeliers glittered overhead like polished teeth. The Drew Reynolds family didn't do subtle, they did performance. Veronica arrived fashionably late, of course. She always did. My cousin and unofficial nemesis since we were old enough to share glitter pens made her entrance wearing a silver dress that looked like it was sewn from mirrors. She kissed everyone's cheeks with the practiced poise of a pageant queen and made sure to linger just long enough in front of the camera stationed by the cake. When people talk about ambition, they imagine people like me, quiet, steady, methodical. But Veronica? She was firework ambition. Loud, flashy, instantly visible and gone just as fast. She didn't build things, she borrowed other people's. Reputation, influence, even love. I'd barely taken a sip of sparkling water when Uncle Byron tapped his spoon to his glass. The room hushed. He stood beneath a golden arch of balloons and gave a long-winded, whiskey-smooth speech about legacy and Southern honor. Then, as expected, he began inviting family members to share memories or well wishes. The mic became a game of emotional hot potato. When it reached me, I hesitated. I didn't want the mic, but I knew what declining would look like. And I wasn't going to give Veronica another reason to spin stories about me being cold or too corporate. I rose, smoothed my dress, and stepped forward. "Uncle Byron," I began, my voice calm, deliberate, and entirely mine. "You taught us that real legacy isn't in the gold-trimmed china or the stock portfolio. It's in the quiet way you never let a child cry alone at a family dinner." There were polite chuckles, a few nods. I felt the room soften just a bit. And then, "I'm sorry to interrupt." Veronica's voice rang out like crystal shattering on tile. She stood now, 2 tables over, a champagne flute in one hand, her other resting delicately on her hip. "But I think it's only fair we acknowledge the elephant in the room before we all start making toasts and pretending nothing's changed." My stomach dropped. Not because I didn't know what was coming, but because I did. She'd been waiting for this moment, setting it up for weeks. She turned to face the crowd, her eyes wide with rehearsed concern. "Some of you may have heard whispers, some of you may not, and I debated saying anything at all, but we're family, and I think family deserves honesty." Several heads turned toward me. I stood frozen, the microphone still in my hand. "Samantha," she said sweetly, as if speaking to a frightened pet, "has been struggling with some financial difficulties. Her company's in trouble. She's facing lawsuits, debt collections, and I believe she's even begun liquidating her assets. A gasp, a murmur, and silence. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I stared directly at her, holding her gaze like a flame I would not let burn me. She's been very brave, Veronica continued, now addressing the family again. Keeping it all to herself, not asking for help. But I think it's time we offer support, not judgment. I smiled. That was what scared her the most, not denial, not outrage, not defense. The smile. Because it meant I wasn't surprised. Because it meant I'd expected this. Because it meant I had something she didn't know. I'm done, I said softly into the microphone, handing it to the nearest server without breaking eye contact. Then I turned and walked out. No apology, no clarification, no rebuttal. Because you don't fight a snake in a pit full of eggshells. You walk away and you burn the map that led her there. Outside, the air had cooled, a soft breeze carrying the scent of lemon and magnolia. I walked slowly to my car, ignoring the sound of stilettos scrambling behind me, Rachel calling my name, an aunt's hand reaching out, my mother's confused voice in the distance. I didn't stop. I didn't owe them anything tonight. Let them chew on the drama. Let them swallow the silence. Veronica wanted a performance, but I had already exited the stage. And that I knew would haunt her far more than anything I could ever say. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 3 days ago I'd put in an all-cash offer on a riverfront property just outside the city. The same one Veronica had bragged about during last year's Christmas brunch. The one she toured 5 times and swore she'd buy as soon as her crypto investments rebounded. I hadn't bought it to spite her, not entirely. I'd bought it because I was tired of letting people like her tell my story. And the first chapter I was going to rewrite would start with a white envelope, hand-delivered, to every member of the Drew Reynolds family. Inside a single sentence, please join me in celebrating a new beginning. No RSVP required. When people ask me what changed between Veronica and me, they always expect a single moment. A dramatic betrayal, a fight, a stolen boyfriend. But life isn't a tabloid headline. It's quieter, slower. Wounds don't just burst open, they bleed gradually, drop by drop, until one day you wake up and realize your hands have been stained for years. We weren't always like this. There was a time when Veronica was my best friend. We built sandcastles together at Folly Beach. We made up dance routines in Aunt Laurel's living room. We whispered secrets under quilts and swore we'd never tell anyone else. She was 2 years older, and I idolized her not for what she had, but for how she made everything seem exciting. Loud, but never reckless. At least not yet. It all started to change the summer our grandfather died. Grandpa Drew wasn't a rich man, but he was respected. A former Marine turned local historian, he spent his final years compiling decades of family stories into a leather-bound journal he kept locked in his desk drawer. To us, he was more than an elder. He was an anchor, a voice that didn't shout, a presence that didn't pressure. When he passed, the whole family showed up in black linen and rehearsed grief, but Veronica and I grieved differently. I cried alone in the hallway. She didn't cry at all. The shift came during the reading of the will. The lawyer, an old man with liver spots and too tight suspenders, read off the distribution of property antiques and what little savings Grandpa had left. There were polite nods and fake tears until he reached the part about the journal. To Samantha Drew, he said, adjusting his glasses, I leave my written legacy. The family record, the truths no one else dared put on paper. A hush fell over the room. Veronica's eyes didn't blink. I remember the exact moment she looked at me. Not with rage, with disbelief, as if a script had been rewritten in front of her. In her mind, she was always the chosen one, the granddaughter who baked pies with Grandpa, who quoted his war stories at school assemblies, who knew how to make grief look photogenic. The fact that he left his most private treasure to me, quiet, plain, unpolished me, was a betrayal she never forgave. That summer, we stopped sharing secrets. By fall, she was posting college dorm selfies with captions like "Built by Legacy." I stayed in state for college, worked 2 part-time jobs, and ate lentils for dinner most nights. I didn't care about appearances. I was chasing a bigger idea, building something that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Not my family's, not hers. When I told them I wasn't going into law or finance like the rest of the Drew cousins, the silence was palpable. My father tried to hide his disappointment behind words like independence and exploration. My mother used phrases like, she's just finding her path. Veronica didn't bother with euphemisms. She's wasting her degree selling kale and wooden spoons online, she told Grandma Ruth at Christmas. I know because Grandma told me with a shrug as if it were a weather report. Meanwhile, Veronica moved to Atlanta, got an apartment with exposed brick and a walk-in closet, and took a job in luxury branding. What she really did was curate envy. Her Instagram was a catalog of handbags, rooftop brunches, and champagne bottles next to quotes about power and femininity. Every family gathering became a contest. Who wore what? Who drove what? Who made the most dramatic entrance? Veronica would always win the room until someone asked me what I'd been working on. That's when the shift would happen. Uncle Byron would lean in, genuinely curious. Aunt Diane would whisper, "She's got real hustle, that one." And I'd feel Veronica's eyes on me, measured tight, unblinking. Jealousy is hard to name in real time. It doesn't show up wearing horns. It dresses as concern. It hides behind phrases like, "I just want what's best for you," or "Don't take this the wrong way." But I always knew. I knew when she laughed too hard at my setbacks. When she shared accidental screenshots of my early website glitches with our cousins. When she told our grandmother that Samantha's business is cute but not scalable. And still I never fought back. Not because I was weak, but because I understood something she didn't. Reputation is like glass. The ones who throw stones the loudest are usually standing in the most fragile houses. The night after the party, I drove home without music. Charleston's roads at midnight are empty in a way that feels holy. Spanish moss draped from oaks like velvet reminders that some things grow heavy over time. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw the porch light was still on. My mother's habit. Even now, even when we barely speak between holidays, she still turns that light on just in case I need it. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels loaded. My parents had left early from the party. I had hoped they'd gone to bed. They hadn't. I found them in the kitchen sitting with untouched tea. My father looked up, cleared his throat, and asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" I shook my head and reached for the kettle. My mother stood. "Veronica said you're in some kind of financial trouble. She said she was just trying to help." I didn't respond. "Is it true?" She pressed, more concerned with the embarrassment than the truth. "Would you have asked me this yesterday?" I asked, before she made a scene. She hesitated. That was enough of an answer. "We're just worried," honey, Dad said. I know, I replied, my voice like ice cracking. "But you believed her before you believed me, like always." I left the tea, walked upstairs, closed the door to my childhood bedroom, and locked it. Nothing in that room had changed in years. The floral wallpaper, the twin bed, the bookshelf with Nancy Drew spines cracked open from overuse. It felt like a time capsule, or a trap. I moved to the closet, reached to the top shelf, and pulled down the wooden box. It was smooth, oak, the size of a dictionary. Etched on the lid were Grandpa Drew's initials and the date 1943. Inside were photographs, old military pins, and the leather-bound journal he'd left me. But under the journal was something else I hadn't touched in years, a sealed envelope with my name in his handwriting. Only to be opened when you no longer recognize the person in the mirror. I hadn't opened it the day of the funeral, or when I moved out, or when Veronica first started stealing my ideas and selling them as her own. But tonight I couldn't even recognize the version of me that had smiled in that ballroom. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, written in Grandpa's looping script. He didn't tell me to forgive her. He didn't say to rise above it. What he said was this: "Sometimes people build empires on top of you because they think you'll never move. The moment you do, they crumble. Don't wait for permission to stand, especially not from those who benefit from your silence." There was no signature, no moral, just that. I held the paper in both hands and let the words seep in. Veronica had spent years building her empire on my silence. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to move. The morning after the party, I woke before the sun. I didn't dream, or if I had, they stayed hidden beneath the heavy hush of betrayal still clinging to my skin. My body felt like it had run a marathon, but my mind had the stillness of steel, sharp, quiet, and deliberate. I poured myself black coffee, sat at the kitchen counter in silence, and opened my laptop. If Veronica was going to drag my name through the fire, I needed to make sure there wasn't a spark she could fan into a blaze. I started with numbers. My company wasn't bankrupt. It wasn't even close. We were in a restructuring phase, a pivot. A storm had hit, yes. A major supplier overseas had folded unexpectedly, leaving us scrambling to refill inventory and cover logistics. And yes, that had meant pausing payroll, scaling back marketing, pulling a bridge loan that looked ugly on paper, but it was tactical. What Veronica had painted as collapse was strategy. But the part that unnerved me wasn't her lies. It was her detail. She hadn't made vague insinuations at that party. She'd spoken about asset liquidation, timelines, bank negotiations, words no one in my family should have access to unless they had seen what I had seen: internal reports, financial projections, emails. That was what made my skin crawl. I didn't care about the public embarrassment. I could handle shame. I'd built my life enduring it. What I couldn't tolerate was infiltration. Someone had gotten into my private records. I opened my business Gmail. The alerts were clean, no known hacks. I double-checked the IP logins, one from my device in Charleston, one from my assistant's location in Vermont. All matched. Then I remembered something subtle, almost forgotten 3 weeks ago during a brief visit from my cousin Elise, the sweet one in the family. She'd borrowed my iPad to check a recipe. She'd never cooked a day in her life. I opened my device access list. There it was. An iPad login unfamiliar, active for 17 minutes, logged out, location still traced to my own Wi-Fi. I followed the trail. One document had been opened, Drew Holdings Q2 Consolidated Report, internal draft. It contained projections, potential pivot plans, and a contingency clause I hadn't even shown my board. I froze. Then I opened my personal email. In the spam folder, buried among junk from old newsletters and promotional garbage, was a forwarded message chain. It originated from an address under Elise's name, but the header had been changed. The attachment, Samantha Drew, financial viability. Concerns. The recipient, veronica.reynolds.prejmail.com. My heart clenched. I clicked the message open. The content was minimal. A forwarded thread with no subject. The file sent as a zipped PDF with red pen commentary that looked eerily like Veronica's voice. This confirms she's in financial distress, likely more than she's letting on. Might be useful if you want to have a family discussion soon. Useful? That was the word she used. As if my private documents were a utility. An instrument for her. A script for her next act. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared at the screen as the sunlight crept through the kitchen blinds and crawled across the tile. So that was how she'd done it. She'd manipulated Elise, eager, insecure Elise, who always wanted to be accepted by the shiny side of the family. Veronica had made herself a confessional box, whispered false empathy into Elise's loneliness, and collected the sins she could exploit. And Elise had handed it all over. It wasn't just betrayal, it was engineering. And that was when I understood Veronica didn't just stumble into cruelty. She crafted it. She built it like a brand. I closed the laptop, set my jaw, and picked up my phone. Not to call her. Not yet. Instead, I called my financial advisor. The line picked up with a familiar voice. "Morning, Sam. You're early. Tell me something," I said flatly. "Is that lakefront property on Wentworth Island still on the market?" There was a pause followed by the shuffling of papers. The 5-bedroom with the wraparound porch, the one with the private dock and oversized windows. That's the one. Another pause. Actually, funny you ask. It came back up just last week. Divorce case. Owners need a quick exit. It's undervalued now. They're open to cash offers. Cash. Not loans, not financing. Cash was control. I said, make the offer today. You're sure that's a big move? I've never been more sure in my life. Veronica had spent the last 2 years calling that lake house her manifestation property. She talked about it every Thanksgiving, told cousins it was her dream venue for her future wedding reception, posted Pinterest boards filled with color palettes that matched its brickwork and shoreline. She even once claimed she'd measured for furniture, though she never made a formal offer. She couldn't afford it. She knew that. We all did. But that didn't stop her from branding it with her name. She made it hers in the same way she made my business hers at that party. And I was done letting her name things she didn't own. By noon, the paperwork was in progress. I'd offered slightly over asking with one caveat: close in 14 days, no inspections, and everything in cash. I wasn't doing this to play games. I wasn't even doing it out of revenge. I was doing it because for the first time in a long time, I could see what freedom looked like. Not vengeance, not applause, just clarity. And that clarity looked like 2.6 acres of riverfront silence. That evening, as I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and the contract open on my tablet, I received a text from Elise. It read, "Hey Sam, just wanted to say sorry if things were weird at the party. Veronica told me you were going through a hard time and didn't want me to say anything. Hope you're okay." I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to send the PDF. Part of me wanted to call her, scream until her ears rang, tell her that her little mistake had become an avalanche. But I didn't. I just typed, "Thank you for your concern. Things are better than ever." And I meant it. Because now I knew who she was, who Veronica was, and more importantly, who I was not going to be anymore. The next morning, the real estate agent called me. "Offer accepted," she said, her voice edged with surprise. They didn't even counter. They just won out. Of course they did. Because some people can't wait to run from what they used to love. And some of us, we build lives inside the ruins. I poured another cup of coffee, pulled up a blank document, and began drafting something new. Not an announcement, not an apology, just a single sentence. A sentence that would arrive in white envelopes on thick cardstock sealed in wax. "You are cordially invited to a private celebration at the new home of Samantha Drew." No details, no explanations. Let them wonder. Let her panic. I wasn't just reclaiming the narrative. I was relocating it, and she wouldn't be able to follow. There's something sacred about silence when it's chosen, not forced. That was the space I entered in the days following the accepted offer. Not revenge, not celebration. Just a kind of breath-holding stillness, like watching the last ember before it catches flame. Everything had to be perfect, quiet, clean, undetectable. I'd learned long ago that in families like ours, secrets didn't rot in the dark, they flourished. What killed them was daylight, and that meant anything I did from now on had to be invisible. First order of business: distance. I couldn't afford for the property to be traced directly to me, not at first. Not with Veronica circling like a hawk with Wi-Fi, so I did what any strategist would: I created a shell. Technically, it was an LLC, Marrow House Holdings, generic, bland, the kind of name no one questions. I had it filed through a registered agent in Delaware, routed through a business address in Tampa, and used a secondary trust I'd set up during the early days of my startup money that had sat untouched for years, growing quietly like an insurance policy on my own independence. The total transaction, $938,000 plus closing costs, was paid in full within 72 hours. No financing, no bank trails, no red flags. It was legally the cleanest purchase I'd ever made. Emotionally, it was the dirtiest thing I'd ever done. And I loved every second of it. Not because it hurt her, but because it liberated me. I stayed offline for the next 4 days. No social posts, no family chats. I let Veronica swim alone in the pool of her fabricated narrative, smiling politely at texts from cousins checking in with just making sure you're okay after everything V said. I replied once, looking forward to reconnecting soon. Big news coming. That was enough to light the fuse. Now came the match. On Monday morning, I visited a small print shop on the outskirts of Charleston. Not a chain, a local place. The kind with wood-paneled counters and a bell over the door that actually chimed. The owner, a retired Navy veteran named Pete, remembered me from years ago. I'd helped his daughter set up a Shopify store for her ceramic jewelry during my early consulting days. I need something custom, I told him. Elegant, mysterious. How mysterious are we talking? Envelope thick enough to imply formality. Script fancy enough to confuse people, but not too much information. He raised an eyebrow. You're planning a wedding or a war? I smiled, little of both. He let out a laugh and got to work. By Wednesday, a stack of 90 envelopes sat in my passenger seat, cream cardstock embossed with a subtle gold seal, inside a single card. You are cordially invited to a private engagement celebration. Location 1487 Waterside Lane, Charleston. Attire, formal time 3:00 p.m. Date August 20th. Further details to be announced at the event. No RSVP, no names. Just that. Let them guess. Let them talk. Let Veronica choke on the mystery of not knowing if the party was about her or against her. The morning I mailed the invitations, I wore gloves. Not because I was hiding, but because I wanted no trace. I dropped the stack at 5 different postal boxes across the city. A slow burn delivery. I wanted the family to receive them sporadically. No synchronized notifications, just a ripple of confusion. The first wave of reactions hit by Thursday evening. Texts flooded the family group chat. Who's getting engaged? Is this about you, V? Did Samantha just pull off a secret wedding? I didn't respond. Neither did Veronica. But I knew she was seething. She couldn't stand being out of the loop. She lived in control, in appearances, in curated responses, and here I was offering the one thing she couldn't handle: uncertainty. By Friday, she broke. The call came at 9:17 a.m. Her voice was low-clipped, almost civil. Hey, just checking in. Heard about some invitations. That from you. I kept my tone neutral. Could be. Long pause. Well, if it is, congratulations. I waited. The second shoe was coming. I'm just surprised you didn't say anything earlier. We could have coordinated, helped plan. There it was, the invitation to let her take control. Spin it, insert herself. I appreciate that, I said softly, but this one's just mine. I ended the call before she could reply. That same afternoon, Veronica made a call of her own. She didn't know I'd rerouted my old office landline to a recorder. I hadn't planned to use it again, but something in my gut had told me to leave the old systems in place. She called from a blocked number. Hey, it's me, she said quickly. I need to run a name again, Samantha Drew, or possibly under Drew Holdings, or what was the other one? Something with Harvest. A pause. No, nothing criminal. Just want to make sure she's not doing something shady with assets. She's moving too quietly. And now this engagement thing, it doesn't feel right. Another pause. She dropped her voice to a whisper. Can you pull any new filings, LLCs, real estate transfers? I want everything, even if it's out of state. She hung up with a curt bill me later. I played the recording twice, staring at my phone as her words repeated. She's moving too quietly. She said it like a threat, like silence itself was offensive. She wasn't just suspicious. She was scared. Good. Let her be. Let her scramble call lawyers, dig through databases, and come up empty-handed. Because the only thing she'd find in the dark now was her own reflection. The night before the party, I sat alone in the living room of my new house. The movers had left just hours earlier. Furniture minimal, decorations non-existent, just one long table in the great room, a dozen white candles, and a simple linen runner down the center. In the center of that runner, I placed a single object, a ring box, empty. It wasn't a symbol of a proposal. It was a mirror, an echo, the story of every time she'd tried to box me in and leave me hollow. Tomorrow, I wasn't going to announce an engagement. I was going to announce my liberation, and she was going to hear it ring. The sky over Charleston that Saturday afternoon looked like it had been painted on with a silk brush, soft blue unmarred. The kind of weather that feels too beautiful to be real, too perfect to be trusted. At exactly 2:15 p.m., the first black SUV rolled up the curved gravel drive of 1487 Waterside Lane. By 2:50, the long circular path in front of the house shimmered with luxury sedans, SUVs, and one vintage Porsche that belonged to Uncle Byron's midlife crisis. The driveway looked like a valet line outside a Hamptons gala. No one knew why they were here, not really. That was the point. They came in heels and suits, linen dresses and diamonds, drawn not by certainty but curiosity. Family gossip, after all, was a blood sport, and Samantha Drew had just set the table. The exterior of the home had been transformed. Soft ivory drapes flowed from the porch railing. White roses lined the entrance. Candles floated inside tall glass vases around the garden path. On the front lawn, a live violinist played box air on a loop, like the soundtrack to a dream no one wanted to wake from. There was no welcome sign, no seating chart, no groom, just one question hanging in the humid air. What the hell is happening? At precisely 300 p.m., the double doors opened. And there she was, Samantha, wearing a floor-length white gown, minimal striking cut like silence. Her hair was pulled back into a loose bun, a single pearl pin tucked just above her left ear. No jewelry, no makeup that screamed, just presence. She walked slowly down the porch steps, no one by her side, no bouquet in her hand. Her gaze didn't search the crowd. She looked ahead, steady, focused, free. Whispers rippled like wind through the crowd. "Where's the fiancé? She didn't say a name. Is this even a wedding?" Aunt Clarice clutched her pearls as if the absence of a man was more scandalous than the absence of truth. But Samantha didn't flinch. She made her way to the small platform under a white arbor wrapped in eucalyptus and twinkle lights. A microphone waited for her. She didn't touch it yet. Behind her, the house gleamed under the afternoon sun. It had taken her breath away when she'd walked in the first time. The wraparound porch, the high-beamed ceilings, the scent of pine wood and river air. But today wasn't about the house. It was about what the house had survived, and who hadn't. Veronica arrived at 3:07. Late, of course, because drama demands an entrance. Her heels clicked like gunshots against the stone. She wore an emerald green dress that hugged her body like jealousy does, tight and bright enough to demand attention, but sharp enough to cut anyone who got too close. She stepped from the car and froze. Her eyes scanned the crowd, the drapery, the candles. Then the house. Recognition hit her like a slap. This house. Her house. The one she told everyone she was saving for. The one she said was her vision board in real life. The one she claimed she'd just barely missed because of bad timing. Her jaw clenched, her nostrils flared, but she didn't move, because she understood. She understood in one breathless second what the rest of the family hadn't caught yet. This wasn't a wedding. It was a message. And she wasn't the audience. She was the subject. Inside the crowd, the energy twisted. Rachel whispered to Aunt Delilah, "Is that the same place V wanted to buy? I thought she said it was off-market." No, someone else murmured she said it was hers. I remember. Christmas brunch last year. People were starting to do the math. And Samantha still hadn't spoken a word, not until Veronica stepped forward. Their eyes met. 2 decades of silence clashed in that single glance. Veronica tilted her head, feigning grace. "Well," she said loudly enough for the first few rows to hear, "this is a surprise." Samantha gave a small smile. "Then it's working." She turned to the microphone, took a breath, and began. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice calm, measured, without apology. "I know you're all wondering why you're here, what this is, who I'm marrying." She let that hang. A soft chuckle passed through a few guests. Nervous, curious, suspicious. Samantha continued. "This isn't a wedding. There is no fiancé. There never was." Now the whisper became a wave. People turned to each other, confused. Samantha's eyes moved slowly across the crowd. "I invited you here for something else," she said. "For something more important." Pause. Truth. A stunned silence blanketed the lawn. "I spent most of my life playing roles I didn't audition for," she said. "The quiet one, the practical one, the girl with no edge, no drama, no spotlight. I let other people speak for me, interpret me, shape how you saw me because I thought silence was strength." She looked straight at Veronica now. But silence, when weaponized by others, becomes complicity. Veronica's face hardened, but she didn't interrupt. 3 weeks ago at a party meant to celebrate family, I was publicly accused of hiding financial ruin. Bankruptcy, failure. I didn't defend myself, not because I was guilty, but because I wanted to see who would believe it. A beat. And who wouldn't bother asking me first. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Samantha didn't flinch. What happened wasn't just a personal attack. It was a reflection of how this family treats truth as optional, moldable, a game piece. She glanced at the house behind her. This house, was never about real estate. It was about reclaiming something I didn't even know I'd lost. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I didn't buy this place to punish anyone. I bought it to end something. A cycle, a performance, a lie." She took one step forward. "This isn't a celebration of love between two people. She let the next sentence fall like a hammer. It's a burial. Gasps, audible now. Veronica's jaw twitched. Samantha held up the empty ring box. This is the ring I didn't need, she said, because this day is not about promise, it's about closure. She closed the box with a click that echoed through the microphone. Then she smiled. Enjoy the food. She turned and walked back into the house, leaving the truth sharp, brutal, unblinking, hanging in the summer air like smoke from a bridge that had finally gloriously burned. The garden was silent in the wake of Samantha's speech. She had walked back into the house with the calm of a woman who had just burned the temple and left the match on the altar. Outside guests were still frozen, some in awe, some in discomfort, and a few in denial. But Veronica was not frozen. She was moving. Fast. Across the lawn, up the steps, heels clicking against the deck boards like tiny detonations. She flung open the double doors of the living room, now dimly lit and echoing with the violinist's somber exit. Samantha was standing at the far end near the great room's fireplace, sipping water. Alone. Composed. Like she'd been expecting this moment all her life. Are you insane? Veronica hissed, barely keeping her voice from cracking. What the hell was that? Samantha didn't look startled. She turned to face her calm and unblinking. That was the truth. No! Veronica snapped, stepping closer. That was a staged humiliation. A setup. You lured everyone here just to make me look like the villain. Samantha tilted her head, almost curious. You did that on your own. The room was starting to fill, family members trickling in from the lawn. Murmurs turned into conversations. Conversations into whispers. Whispers into watching. No one stepped between them. Not yet. You think you're clever, Veronica spat. You think just because you bought this house and threw on a white dress that people will forget who you are. I'm counting on them remembering, Samantha said, placing her glass down carefully. For once. Veronica's laugh was bitter, short, sharp. You really think this stunt makes you noble? No, Samantha said quietly. It makes me done. Then she stepped forward, voice steady but sharpened now, for everyone to hear. You went through my files, Veronica. You accessed my business reports. You forwarded internal documents to people who had no right to see them. And then you used that information, twisted it to fabricate a lie you paraded in front of our entire family. Mouths dropped open. A few people gasped. Aunt Diane clutched her husband's arm. I don't know what you're talking about, Veronica said, quickly laughing again, but the pitch of it was off now. I was trying to help you. You were spiraling and... You called me bankrupt, Samantha cut in. Publicly, at Uncle Byron's birthday, with no warning, no proof. I had proof. No, Samantha said louder. You had stolen projections, preliminary drafts, things I never filed, never published, and never showed to you. Veronica's face paled, but she didn't stop. Don't twist this, she snapped. You left your tablet unlocked. She just saw something and thought. Elise didn't act alone, Samantha said. She told me. She said you asked her to find something, said you were worried about my financial decisions, that you just wanted to know the truth, so you could, warn everyone. I didn't tell her to. I have the email, Veronica. Samantha reached for a folder on the nearby console table. She didn't hand it to anyone. She didn't need to. She simply opened it, pulled out a printed thread of messages, and held them up. I have the headers, the forwarded documents, the timestamp. I even have the recording of your call to the investigator. Now the color drained completely from Veronica's face. You recorded me. You called my business line, Samantha said. It's legally recorded for compliance. You knew that. You've called before. A thick silence pressed against the walls. The crowd had swelled now. Cousins, aunts, uncles, even Emma and Uncle Byron had entered, and no one was speaking. Veronica did the only thing left in her arsenal. She broke. Her voice cracked, lips trembled. I was scared, she whispered, tears welling. I thought you were in trouble. You were acting weird, and I panicked. I didn't mean to hurt you. Samantha's gaze didn't waver. You didn't panic, you prepared. Veronica turned to the crowd, now gesturing helplessly. She's trying to destroy me. She's always been jealous I had to work twice as hard to get noticed in this family while she got handed Grandpa's legacy and... Enough! The voice came not from Samantha but from Uncle Byron. He stepped forward from the crowd, his face stern, disappointed. You had your say, Veronica. Now you need to listen. No more tears, Aunt Clarice added. We've seen this performance before. Others murmured agreement. The tide was shifting, the walls were closing. Veronica looked around, for sympathy, for a way out. But all she found were faces reflecting her lies back at her. Even Elise, sweet passive Elise, stood silently in the corner, eyes on the floor, hands clenched. She looked ashamed. Samantha stepped forward once more, this time with something small in her hand. A wooden ring box. Old worn. She opened it, revealing a simple brushed gold ring, a design decades old. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive. It was real. This, Samantha said, holding the ring up, was Grandpa's, the one he wore after the war. He left it to me not because I was the favorite, but because he knew I wouldn't let the weight of it crush me. She walked slowly to the long banquet table, untouched, a perfect white linen cloth covering its surface. With a deliberate motion, she placed the ring at the center. The gesture felt ancient, ritualistic. A burial. This ring doesn't belong to me, she said. Not anymore. It belongs to what came before. To the choices we made in silence. The games we played to survive this family. The wounds we passed down like dinner plates. She turned toward her relatives, eyes clear, voice unwavering. I'm not playing anymore. No one spoke. Veronica's lip trembled, but she stayed silent. And somewhere in that silence, something cracked. Not loud, not violent, just a quiet breaking. Of illusion. Of legacy. Of her. Samantha took a deep breath and walked away, leaving the ring on the table, a full circle. Finally closed. Veronica didn't leave through the front door. She disappeared through the side gate, her heels leaving dents in the damp earth behind the hydrangeas. The sound of conversations inside the house, soft jazz, clinking glasses, awkward laughter, trying to reset normal, faded behind her. She didn't make it to her car before the tears came. She sat behind the wheel of her red BMW, shaking hands on the steering wheel, mascara bleeding into her collarbone. Her chest heaved, but she didn't sob. Not loudly, just a low, breathless, desperate kind of breakdown. The kind that happens when there's nothing left to perform for. No audience, no spotlight, just herself. And the echo of Samantha's voice still hanging in the back of her mind like smoke in old curtains. She hadn't thought it would play out like this. Even after the confrontation, even after the speech, she had clung to the belief that she could spin it, charm her way back, rewrite the ending in real time like she always did. But no one had followed her out. No one had tried to stop Samantha, not this time. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She opened Instagram on instinct, finger hovering over the story button, ready to post some curated image of resilience, red eyes, candlelight, a quote about betrayal from a poet she'd never read. She paused and shut the app, because for the first time in years, it didn't feel worth it. You okay? The voice startled her. She jerked, turning to find someone at her passenger side window. It was Henry. Cousin Henry, the quiet one. Barely spoken since college. Wore glasses that always slipped down his nose and had a perpetual coffee stain on his cuff. He motioned gently toward the door. Can I sit? She hesitated. Then popped the lock. He slid in beside her. No judgment in his expression, just quiet presence. He held a half-full paper cup from the bar and offered it to her. It's ginger ale, he said. She took it, too surprised to speak. They sat in silence for a moment. Only the sound of the lake in the distance, soft wind brushing against the trees, and the muffled soundtrack of a family finally learning how to breathe without pretending. I remember when you were my hero, Henry said suddenly. Veronica blinked, caught off guard. What? You were 15. I was maybe 10. We were at Grandma Ruth's for New Year's. You wore this ridiculous feather boa and told me I didn't have to eat the green beans if I hated them. He smiled slightly. You said, Henry, the secret to surviving this family is looking confident even when you're lying. Veronica let out a shaky laugh. Half shock, half sorrow. That sounds like me. He turned toward her now, his voice low. But I think you started believing the lie, even when you didn't have to. She looked at him, then really looked, and for the first time didn't feel bigger or better. She felt small, like the kind of person who gave advice a child would carry for decades, and used it to become something hollow. You wanted to be seen, Henry said. That's not a crime, but somewhere along the way it became everything. And now, this. Veronica stared straight ahead. I thought being admired was the same as being loved. Henry nodded. It's not. A silence settled again, this time not heavy but honest. Veronica didn't cry again. She just whispered, I don't know who I am without all of it. Henry didn't answer. He just stayed. That was enough. Upstairs in the quietest corner of the river house, Samantha sat cross-legged on a bed that wasn't yet hers, staring out the window. The sun had dipped behind the trees. Long shadows stretched across the grass, and the last guests were slowly trickling out, their voices distant like the end of a song. She'd said what needed to be said. But peace was never as instant as people imagined. It didn't come like rainfall. It came like thaw, slow, cautious aching in places you didn't know were frozen. Her room was still bare, a single suitcase in the corner. Her laptop unopened sat on the nightstand like a sleeping truth. She didn't reach for it yet. Instead, she opened a drawer and pulled out a photo she hadn't looked at in years. It was her and Veronica, ages 8 and 10, arms flung around each other at a lake picnic, faces sunburnt grins, uneven teeth missing. Veronica had wrapped a string of beads around her own head like a crown. Samantha was laughing. It was taken 3 days before their grandfather died. That was the last time she remembered laughing like that beside her. That photo didn't lie. It didn't manipulate. It just was. A moment before the weight of legacy comparison and curated lives drove a wedge that neither of them had the tools to name, let alone remove. And now Samantha could finally see it for what it was. They were both hurting, but only one of them had turned pain into a performance. She looked away from the photo, heart tight but clear. She didn't want revenge. Not anymore. Not even after everything. She wanted release. She turned to her laptop. Opened a blank email. To Veronica, reynolds.prejmail.com subject body. I don't know what comes next. I won't pretend to, but I know I'm done being angry. If you're ready to be real, no cameras, no audience, my door is open. I want my sister back, but only if she's ready to leave the spotlight behind. She hovered over the send button for 3 seconds, then clicked. And with that one act, not of retaliation but of radical clarity, she severed the last chain to the past that had defined them both. Outside, the river moved. Not fast, not loud, but forward. It had been 31 days since the ring was left on the banquet table. In internet time, a month was a lifetime, enough to start a war or stop one. Veronica Reynolds had been silent for all 31 of those days. No posts, no stories, no brand collaborations. Her once vibrant Instagram grid had frozen in time, still holding curated images of champagne glasses, throw pillows, and motivational captions written in Canva font. But on a quiet Sunday morning, as the sun rose over Charleston's skyline, something changed. She posted a plain black background, no filters, no music, just text white center aligned, and raw. I built a life to be seen, but I forgot how to see myself. I hurt someone who loved me like a sister, because she was my sister. I betrayed that love out of fear, out of ego, and out of the belief that I needed applause to feel worthy. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope to deserve it someday. The post went viral. But not because of celebrity gossip pages or influencer drama hunters. It spread quietly, woman to woman, inbox to inbox, like a note passed in the back of a classroom, like a truth that finally found breath. Some praised her vulnerability. Others questioned her motives. But the most important reply came in the form of a simple emoji. From an account named Samantha Drew Financial. Veronica didn't respond. She just sat at her kitchen table alone, textbook open note cards sprawled around her, and whispered to no one. Okay, start again. She enrolled in a local financial literacy course paid in full, no sponsorships, no hashtag partnerships, no press releases about reinventing, just work, quiet, repetitive, deeply uninstagrammable work. Balance sheets, tax codes, compound interest. She deleted half her online presence, let go of the networking events that felt like fashion shows, unfollowed people she used to compare herself to in the dark. She stopped buying white candles just to photograph them. She learned how credit actually worked. She cried the day she learned how deeply in debt she'd really been. And then she stopped crying, because tears were just the first stage of honesty. Now came rebuilding, for no one's approval but her own. Meanwhile, across town, the River House had transformed. Not in decor, but in purpose. Samantha turned the sunroom into a workshop space. She replaced the ivory drapes with light bamboo blinds and stacked shelves with journals, worksheets, and a coffee machine that never stopped humming. Once a week, women arrived, some carrying toddlers, some carrying scars. They sat in a circle. They opened laptops. They opened wounds. The program was called Reclaiming Room. Not a brand, a mission. The tagline, no permission needed to build your own table. Samantha didn't stand at a podium. She sat with them, shared the documents that once nearly got weaponized against her, walked them through P&L statements like puzzle pieces, explained financial independence not as rebellion but as protection. And when someone asked, why did you start this, she never gave them a brochure answer. She told the truth. About a white dress, and a ring that was never worn, and a family dinner that ended with liberation. They listened, and they stayed. One evening after her last session of the day, Samantha walked into the kitchen and found 2 messages on her phone. The first was from a woman named Letitia, a program participant who had just opened her own bakery thanks to a microloan Samantha helped her navigate. The second was from her mother, just 2 words, dinner Sunday. Samantha stared at the screen, then smiled. That Sunday, she returned to the house she'd once grown up in, the one that always felt more like a museum than a home. Her father opened the door. He looked older than she remembered, though only a month had passed. His eyes were soft, vulnerable in ways she'd never seen. Samantha, he said, no pretense, no forced cheer. She nodded, hi, Dad. They hugged. And that was the beginning. Inside, her mother had set the table. 3 plates, no centerpiece, no champagne, just pot roast and green beans and the kind of quiet that usually came before apologies. Samantha sat down. Her father cleared his throat. We've been watching. She looked up. Your workshops, he said. We found the site. Her mother jumped in, hands folded. We didn't know how much pressure we added, with the comparisons, the silence. We just assumed you'd be okay. Samantha didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes were enough. Her father sighed. We let things fester between you and Veronica. We thought, if we stayed out of it, it would resolve itself. But silence, her mother whispered, isn't neutral. It's permission. Samantha blinked. And for the first time in what felt like a decade, she saw 2 people trying, not to fix the past, but to be present. She nodded. Thank you, she said. And they ate, not perfectly, but together. After dinner, she walked outside. The wind had picked up. the kind of breeze that suggested change, autumn brushing the edges of summer's last breath. Her phone buzzed. One new message from Veronica. I saw your program. I'd like to attend a session, if you'll let me. No cameras, no platform, just me. Samantha stared at the words, then tapped. Come early. We make coffee together before we start. She hit send, slipped the phone in her coat pocket, and walked into the wind lighter, not because the past was gone, but because it finally had somewhere to go. The email subject line was blunt. Potential litigation, urgent review required. It came from Samantha's corporate legal counsel, marked as high priority, flagged with red, and accompanied by a formal attachment. She opened it cautiously, reading each line like it was a crack in glass that could shatter beneath her fingertips. Allegation summary, unauthorized access of internal documents, transmission of sensitive financial material to third parties, public defamation impacting brand integrity and investor trust. In simpler terms, Veronica could be sued. Hard. Civil suit, defamation, violation of South Carolina's cybersecurity and identity theft statutes. According to the firm's external consultant, if pushed, the case could end in a six-figure settlement or worse, a court-ordered penalty that would stain Veronica's name for years. Samantha sat back in her chair. Her new office, sunny, modest, overlooking the water, suddenly felt colder. This wasn't a revenge fantasy. This was real and terrifyingly easy. She stared out the window for a long time, fingers tapping the edge of her desk. Not from indecision, but from the weight of clarity. Because now she understood the real cost of power. It wasn't the ability to hurt. It was the responsibility to choose not to. Are you sure, her lawyer asked the next day? He was a sharp man in his 50s, always dressed like court could happen any minute. He adjusted his tie over Zoom and leaned forward. She committed 2 federal-level violations, he continued, one of which could set precedent in family business privacy disputes. This isn't personal, Samantha. It's strategic. If you let this go, you're telling the world there are no consequences. Samantha smiled faintly. There are consequences, just not legal ones. He blinked. She clicked her pen shut. Draft a document of intent, she said. No lawsuit, no settlement. Instead, I want an agreement. An agreement, she nodded. She'll commit to 6 months of community service. He raised a brow. She'll volunteer at reclaiming room, shadow assist, and eventually teach. He was silent. You want her to work for you? He asked. I want her to work for them, Samantha said, and learn what it means to empower without controlling, to guide without manipulating, and maybe to rebuild something honest. He leaned back, exhaled slowly. You're braver than most clients I've had. I'm not brave, she said. I'm tired of courtrooms pretending they're the only place healing can happen. The first day of Veronica's mandated service was quiet. No cameras, no grand entrance. She wore jeans, a cardigan, no makeup, and a name tag that simply read, Volunteer, V. She arrived 30 minutes early as instructed and found Samantha already setting out chairs in the circle room. Neither said much. Samantha handed her a stack of notebooks and a box of markers. Veronica nodded and got to work. That first hour she didn't speak, just observed. Watched as women filed in, young, old single mothers, immigrants, quiet dreamers, weary survivors. Some with ambition in their eyes, others with nothing but fear. The session that day was about budgeting. Simple, practical. But one participant, a 19-year-old with 2 part-time jobs and a 6-month-old baby, asked a question that landed heavier than numbers. What if the people who should have helped me were the ones who held me back? No one answered right away. And then unexpectedly, Veronica spoke. Her voice was soft, cracked but clear. Then you start where you are, she said, and you become who they never gave you permission to be. The room went still. Not because she was famous, but because for the first time she was human. Over the next few weeks, she kept showing up. Early, quiet, focused. She cleaned whiteboards, organized snacks, helped women understand interest rates and predatory lending traps. She cried in the bathroom once after hearing a woman's story of being cut off by her parents for starting her own Etsy business. But she came back the next day. Eventually, Samantha assigned her a group. Nothing big, just 5 women who needed basic one-on-one support for their business plans. Veronica shook the first day. She dropped her notes, forgot the formula for ROI, got flustered when one woman challenged her on startup risk. But she didn't fake confidence. She said, I don't know, but I'll find out. And she did. That night, she stayed up until 3 a.m. watching webinars on entrepreneurship, scribbling case studies on sticky notes, replaying tutorials on Excel. Not because anyone was watching, but because for the first time in her life, she wanted to deserve the space she'd been given. One night, as she was locking up, Samantha caught her at the door. You left this, she said, handing over a forgotten water bottle. Veronica took it, their fingers brushed. They stood in silence for a beat. You didn't have to do any of this, Veronica said. No, Samantha replied, but I wanted to. I don't know if I can ever undo what I did. Samantha shook her head. Don't try to undo it. Just build something better from here. Veronica nodded, eyes wet. And for the first time, the ring that had once separated them wasn't between them anymore. It was behind them. somewhere on a banquet table that no longer needed a spotlight. The sun in Charleston hung low, thick with late summer warmth. It was the kind of afternoon where the breeze was just enough to stir the leaves, where the air hummed with cicadas and the sky wore a soft orange tint like the world had been dipped in honey. The river house stood still and open. No banners this time, no podiums, no name cards or champagne glasses balanced on stems too thin. Just long tables laid out on the grass, fresh corn and ribs sizzling on the grill, homemade lemonade in mason jars. Children chasing each other barefoot between flower beds, laughing like they didn't know what family scars were. Because today wasn't about performance. It was about presence. Samantha had sent the invitation simply summer cookout, just us. No hashtags, no hidden messages, no symbolic unveilings. She didn't even mention the house. If they came as family, not as witnesses, not as critics. And they did come, one by one. Even the distant cousins, even the aunt who usually skipped, even Uncle Mason who still referred to social media as that dang digital scrapbook. And an hour after the first guest arrived, so did Veronica. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pinned up with a wooden clip. She carried a tray of baked macaroni, nervous like it might be rejected on entry. Samantha met her at the gate. "Hey," Veronica said, eyes searching. Samantha grinned. "You brought carbs, you're always welcome." And just like that, the air eased. They joined the others under the soft shade of old oak trees. Plates were filled, stories were swapped, and for the first time in years, there was laughter without tension, eye contact without suspicion. At one point, Samantha's father raised a toast not with wine, but with iced tea. To honesty, he said, voice thick, and to learning it's never too late to change the way we gather. Later, as dusk began to settle, Samantha called the kids to the back deck. There were a dozen of them, ages 6 to 16, some still sticky from watermelon, some rolling their eyes in theatrical teenage fashion. But they came, because something in her voice wasn't like the grown-ups who usually lectured. She didn't stand above them. She knelt. Veronica stood beside her holding a folded paper. Samantha held nothing but her hands clasped in front of her. "Okay," she said. "This isn't a story about money, or success, or what college you get into." The kids quieted. "It's a story about lies," she continued, "and what happens when we use them to protect ourselves, or to feel bigger than we are." Veronica swallowed, then stepped forward. "I lied," she said straight to the kids. "I thought being perfect would make people love me. I hurt someone I loved to keep my image." A murmur among the older kids. One asked, "Did you get in trouble?" Veronica didn't flinch. "Yes," she said, "not just from other people, but from myself. I forgot who I was, and that's the worst punishment." Samantha placed a hand on her shoulder. "But here's what matters," she added. "You can always return to the truth, to the people who knew you before you lost your way." One of the youngest girls raised her hand. "Even if you break everything," Samantha smiled, "especially then." The sky turned lavender. Fairy lights lit up along the hedges. Someone started strumming a guitar by the porch. Laughter floated like music over the yard. Samantha slipped inside for a moment of quiet. The kitchen smelled like cedar and grilled peaches. The house, once a setting for confrontation, now pulsed with warmth, lived in, real. She walked over to the small wooden shelf above the fireplace. There, nestled between two framed photos, sat the box. She opened it. Inside, wrapped in a soft linen cloth, was the ring. The one that once lived in shadows, in vaults of resentment, in whispers about inheritance and legacy and who was chosen. She lifted it gently. The gold was still warm from the sun. She didn't put it on. Instead, she placed it on the shelf. No longer hidden, no longer feared. Just a circle of metal. Now a symbol not of power or claim, but of release. Behind her, Veronica entered the room. "You sure you want to keep it out?" she asked. Samantha looked back. "It doesn't belong to just me," she said. "Not anymore." They stood side by side, the silence between them no longer awkward. Veronica exhaled. "You know, it's strange. I spent years trying to prove I was better, worthy, but here right now I don't want to be the best." "What do you want?" Samantha asked. Veronica shrugged. "Just to belong for real this time." Samantha nodded. "Then stay." And they did. Outside, the fireflies danced. Inside, the past softened. And on a humble wooden shelf, a ring gleamed not as a crown, but as a quiet reminder. Some wounds don't need to be erased, just honored and left behind. The river never rushed in Charleston. It drifted slow, deliberate, like it knew that time could stretch longer if you let it. The sky above bled into amber and blush reflections rippling across the water in silken waves. On the back porch of the river house, Samantha sat alone, a blanket around her shoulders, pen in hand and the sound of cicadas humming like a quiet heartbeat in the background. She flipped to a clean page of her leather-bound journal and wrote carefully, deliberately, no audience, no edit, no performance. August 27th. The difference between revenge and release is one word: silence. I used to believe closure came from confrontation, but tonight it feels more like surrender. Not the kind of surrender that means defeat, the kind that means I don't need to carry it anymore. I'm not here to prove anyone wrong or prove myself right. Freedom, it turns out, doesn't wear trophies or shout its name in rooms full of people. It walks away softly and still wins. She paused, and then added in smaller writing, "I'm free." And she smiled not out of victory, but out of peace. 2 days later, an envelope arrived. It was lavender-colored, sealed with wax, and smelled faintly of cinnamon and ink. Samantha opened it by the window, sunlight catching the shimmer of the paper. Inside was a card. No branding, no logo. Just handwriting, imperfect but unmistakably Veronica's. "Dear Sam, next time if you do have an actual engagement party, please don't leave me off the invite list. I promise not to bring drama, just cake. And maybe finally some good advice. Yours V." Samantha laughed, a deep surprise sound that caught in her throat and lingered like warmth in her ribs. She folded the note carefully and tucked it into the back of her journal. Not for nostalgia, but because it was a symbol now. Not of return, but of reaching forward. Of rewriting what sisterhood could mean. Later that weekend, the two of them walked along the lake just outside town. No words at first. Just gravel crunching beneath their shoes, the rhythm of two people learning how to share silence again, not because they didn't know what to say, but because they didn't have to fill the space anymore. The lake mirrored the dusky pink sky. Birds skimmed the surface. A breeze danced with the hem of Samantha's dress. Veronica walked beside her, arms tucked close, head tilted slightly as if listening not to the wind but to herself. When they reached the old stone bench near the dock, they sat. No speech, no confessions, just presence. After a long while, Veronica asked softly, "Do you ever wish it had happened differently?" Samantha stared at the water. "No," she said, "because then I wouldn't have become who I am now." Veronica nodded. "I think I finally like her," she whispered. Samantha turned to her. "Me too." They smiled, tentative, real, and they stood again, walking slowly along the path, shadows stretching behind them like old stories fading into dusk. As the credits begin to roll, a final voiceover carries the weight of it all. Calm, steady, without bitterness. Some families fracture and never find their way back. Some hide behind silence, others behind smiles. But there is a quiet kind of courage in being the one to speak first. In choosing not to humiliate even when you could. In knowing that your truth doesn't need to be shouted to be real. Don't ever build your reputation on the ruins of someone else. Because dignity, true dignity, is silent, steady, and never borrowed. Fade to black. The ring remains on the shelf. Not a weapon. Not a prize. Just a circle of light catching the sun one last time.